How much food do you really need in a significant event? So if the crap hits the fan in a big way, like how much food do you actually need? So here's what's crazy is I am super excited about this video because it's in response to a person who left a comment on my channel, Periwinkle Blue. So thank you so much, Periwinkle Blue. I'm pretty excited. This is some good stuff. This is what I've been wanting. I've had some negative comments. Welcome to YouTube. It's like I just like some people. They're just there's nothing better to do than like just troll you. You know what I mean? And just I don't even really understand what their comments mean, to be quite honest, other than they're just like, I don't know, just belittling me, calling me an idiot and all that good stuff. So, all right, let's get into it. Let's get into how much food do you actually need. So I want to describe what Periwinkle Blue is saying first of all. So what he's I'm calling him he. Don't even know if it's he, but I'm calling him he, right? So Periwinkle Blue just a comment about insinuating that he used to keep more supplies, but what he decided to do was to give away all of his extra supplies more than what he considered he needed for 2 weeks, right? So basically, he thinks that 2 weeks of supplies is reasonable, and anything above that is indulgent fear. If I'm understanding what Periwinkle Blue was saying in his comments, then that's what he's saying is that 2 weeks of supply is reasonable. Anything more than that is fear based. So I love it. I love it. Thank you very much for your comment. And I want to respond to that. I just think it's awesome that you've thought about this and you've kind of went through that process and you're doing what you feel is upon your heart. At the end of the day, that's all a person can really do. What I'm just going to do is give my perspective. And at the end of it, I'm hoping that maybe I can influence you. I'm not going to try to, act all super humble here. I'm really hoping I can convince you to change. But at the end of the day, I just appreciate that you're thinking about it at all. So this is what we need to do. In my opinion, this is what we need to do is just think about it. So what do I believe? How much food do I am I actively trying to store, or what's my goal? Well, my goal is to get to the point where I have enough food to support 200 people for 1 year. Yes, that's right. I'm sure a whole bunch of people right now are like, Periwinkle Blue's like, did he say enough food for 200 people for a year? Like, that is so fear based. So, you know, like I said, people can have their opinions, but if you watch my videos, you will understand that it's not fear based in any way, shape, or form. It's actually kind of exciting to me, to be quite honest. In some ways, I don't know, maybe you would think it's morbid. I'm hoping one day that I can use this. Why am I hoping for that? Because it means that something has happened to America that has taken away our comfort, and now for the first time in many people's lives, they're actually considering God. So they're considering God, and that I might be the way for them to receive the gospel. That if they come here to get some food, or I'm going there bringing some food, that I'm not going to be doing any of that without professing the gospel and telling people about Jesus Christ. So I'm a wee bit excited about it. I want to be a worker in the field. I want to be bringing in this harvest. It breaks my heart, that Jesus has said, for the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Because all it just basically does is it just exposes us as Christians of how narcissistic we live, just how self-absorbed we live, that there's so many millions of born again Christians on this planet, or whatever flavor of Christian you consider yourself, that there's millions and tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of Christians on the face of this planet, and yet Jesus is basically telling us that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. So I don't want to be in that category. I do not want to stand before my Lord and Savior and then have to somehow explain away how my life was just completely absorbed in me and pursuing all these things for me. So that's the first thing, right? is that I do it with a certain amount of excitement. I think it will really suck if something happens to this country, because I've just been blessed here. I want my kids to be blessed here, but I look around and I see so many people, mostly Christians, to be honest. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of worldly, secular friends too, but it's the Christian community that just seems to be so absorbed in fear because they're so absorbed in themselves. And I don't think it's really. I think a person that can be humble enough to think about other people, I don't think they live in the fear. When I teach my class, Urban Survival for Christians, it's kind of nuts how many people that come to this class thinking that they're going to learn some kind of like special move to be able to like murder 3 people in 5 seconds, or learn this new technique, this new information that's going to help them be able to, avoid the apocalypse. The perfect spot for them to go to, the perfect scenarios for them to engage in. It's all just personal fear, like based anxiety of them trying to figure out how they can avoid what I believe is going to be the unavoidable. I don't think you can avoid it, but that's what they're looking for. And I would say that at any given time, 50% of the people in my class, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people to figure that stuff out. So that's not where I'm at. So whenever I say these things, and I'm sure it's super surprising, and I'm sure I'm going to get some negative comments because it's YouTube, it's okay. It's all right. At least I'm hoping I'm stimulating it and you get to think about it. So is it realistic, if you live in an apartment, is it realistic that you would be trying to store enough food for 200 people for a year? Absolutely not. Where are you going to put 200 people in an apartment? So I want you guys to understand, I have a wee bit of property where I live, and I could probably accommodate 200 people. They're not going to be super comfortable. If it happens in winter, they're probably going to get a wee bit cold. But at the same time, like, I have the opportunity here that if something was to happen, people could come here, and I want to have enough food because I want to be that guy that can give them the gospel. I want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that says, be blessed and be full and give them some food. I want to be the guy that says, be blessed and be warm and gives them a coat or a blanket. Like, I want to be that guy, and I'm excited for it. So, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get every Christian to be excited for that possibility. So it's absolutely not out of fear. It's almost out of hope and anticipation. Like, oh my goodness, like, how much could we do? How much good could we do if something was to happen and go wrong? Which is why I go to these places, which is why, I go and respond to what I believe is God is putting on my heart, to go to these places that I can do something for them, take a tree off their roof, bring some food for them, drive them out of a dangerous zone, like whatever, get them clean water, like whatever it is, that as I'm doing that, I can tell them, hey, the reason why I'm here, and honestly, most of the times I'm saying it in response, because most of the time they're asking me, why are you here? Like, where did you come from? You drove across the country? Why would you do that? And it's like, well, funny you should ask. There's this guy called Jesus, and I get to give the gospel message. It's absolutely incredible. So that's where my heart is. There's absolutely no fear involved in what I do. And it's honestly, it brings me some joy to be thinking, Lord, how awesome is it that you've blessed me to go to these places? That I've slept on the floor, in winter in Ukraine, to literally the complete opposite in Texas, where I literally thought my body was melting and just turning into a puddle. Just couldn't believe how humid it was in Houston. And as an Irishman, like, we're just not built for that. We're not built for Texas weather. It's just, that was insanity, So I've got to be in both extremes, but in both cases, I just loved it. I just loved having the opportunity to be there to bless and help people. So, kind of monologue for a bit there. This video is probably going to be longer than I anticipated, but let's get into it. Okay, so why 200 people for a year? Why the number? Well, hopefully I've explained that. Is I have the space. So I have the space here. The people will be spread out. It won't be super warm. They're not all going to be indoors. But at the end of the day, like we'll do something. We'll make it work. Somehow we'll make it work. Whether it's tents or whatever the case is, we'll make it work, and we'll get people somewhere where they're forming a community. And that's one of my key goals is form a community. How do you form a community out of four people? Or whatever it is that you're storing the food for. If you're storing food for 2 weeks, which by the way, most food probably have pretty close to 2 weeks worth of food in their cupboards, which means you're not doing anything. You're not really doing anything. I mean, you might be cleaning out to the far corners of your cupboards, but you probably might find that the average family, if they were to ration to what their actual caloric intake needed to be for a day, they could probably eke out, 2 weeks worth of food just hanging around their house. So you're not really doing anything actually, like you're not prepping at all. So, and then how do you receive people? How do you receive people if you're instantly thinking, well, I've only got 2 weeks worth of food, but that's just for us? Are you likely to invite people in? But what if you've been storing food specifically with the mindset is that every time you buy a can of food or some dry food or whatever the case is, and you buy a packet, you think, hey, this is for my family, and you simply buy another packet and say that's for another family. Or you buy two more packets and it's like, that's for two other families. So as you store the food, you're always looking at the food as, hey, it's this little portion is ours, and then this other portion is for other people. So that if anything significant wants to happen, I'm able to feed people. And absolutely, I believe with Periwinkle Blue about, I have a video about the food myth, food shortage myths is what my videos are titled. So, hey, Periwinkle, I don't know if you've seen that, but you can check it out. So I believe there's tons of food in this country. The problem is that we don't have good organization. And in addition to, poor organization, we also don't have, I'm sorry, a notification just popped up on my phone. It's totally distracted me. We also don't have, we're fear. We don't have the right attitude. People are just like in such fear when it comes to this scenario that that's how they're going to react. If we were being taught and trained, don't freak out, we have all of these systems in place that if something was to happen, we're going to roll out the National Guard, we're going to start busing people to farms, we're going to bring in the crops even if we don't have fuel or the power grid is out. Like, we've got a system. You might think that you're living in the Middle Ages, but at the same time, we're going to keep feeding people. I don't hear that from any government organizations. I literally just hear fear upon fear upon fear that everyone's going to die. That if the power was to go out, that 80 to 90% of the country is going to be dead in 18 months. That's what I keep hearing being reiterated again and again and again, is that we're all going to die. We're all going to perish. It's going to be horrific. And I just don't believe that. I just don't believe that needs to be the case. And if we all band together, we will prevent that from happening. So I'm going to try to talk about, the amount of people. So if you've got an apartment and maybe you can fit 20 people in there, what have you decided that whatever amount of food that you're going to store up for whatever time period that you're going to store it for, what have you just thought, hey, I'll maximize my space. I can fit 20 people in here. They're not going to be super comfortable, but I can get 20 people in here. What if my goal is to store enough food for 20 people? You live in a house in a neighborhood. Maybe you're up to like 40 people, 30 people. You pick the number. All I'm suggesting is that you think about other people as you're doing this, that you're not just prepping for yourself for that window of time, but that you're prepping for other people in that window of time. that's my suggestion. That's my hope that I can get people into that mindset. So, um, why 2 weeks? You know, I have no idea why Periwinkle is saying 2 weeks. I'm saying a year. Why a year? Why do I think that it needs to be that length of time? Well, if we're going to depend on trying to replant, like it's some kind of massive weather event that kind of, you know, we had a crazy drought, we had a freeze, we have these type of things that happen in places all the time where certain countries will lose a whole crop. Like all the oranges are worthless because it just got too warm, or sorry, it just got too cold. And now all of a sudden in this entire region of South America, there's no oranges coming out of that area. And now the supply has just plummeted. So there's just literally not enough oranges to go around. The prices go through the roof. These are things that are actually happening on somewhat of a regular basis to different crops. So different crops feel, and the prices spike, and we have to then try to figure out how do we make up for it in the following year. What are we going to do? Were all the orange trees destroyed? Blah blah blah. So if we are involved in a significant event, and we have a crop crisis, and that's what's causing the civil unrest and everybody to freak out, is because we're in some situation, then there is no crops. So for you to have your 2 weeks worth of food, it's like, that's great. But then what are you going to do? Because we've had an event with maybe wiped out a significant crop. Now, I personally am on record saying, do I think something like this could happen in America? I think it's super, super unlikely. But here's part of the problem too is, you've got an area like California, which supplies massive amounts of food. You know, California is really considered the breadbasket of America. Just in some ways, like Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of Europe, California is like the breadbasket of America. So when I'm talking about these weather events, and I'm saying about how it's super unlikely that we're going to have a massive weather event that will affect the whole country, you know, in some ways, we don't need to have a weather event that will affect the whole country. We just need to have a weather event that will affect the areas where we get the most food from. So if we had a prolonged drought like we had in California, where all of a sudden we're not getting hardly any food coming out of California, or it happens in one particular year, they're saying that it's going to be an El Nino year or an El Nina, I always get the two of them mixed up, but they're saying it's going to be particularly hot this year in the south. So if that's what the case is, and it's going to be particularly hot in the south, and we have massive crop failures in California, that could affect the whole country. So having a year's worth of food means that we can weather whatever happened that affected the crops, whatever yield that was significantly diminished for whatever that was, and now we're able to feed and replant. So that's kind of, there's other reasons, but that's kind of somewhat of, I think, the best way to articulate it in somewhat of a shorter video is that I believe that we need to have the ability to survive, that we can get things back in the ground, that we crack out our seed vaults, which I recommend everyone has, heirloom seed vaults. We crack out our seed vaults and we can start growing food. So one of the things that I heard is that there's going to be a problem with the tomatoes this year. So we're going to have an issue with the tomatoes, mostly because of tariffs. If the tariffs kick in, I think it was from Mexico, that we're not going to get tomatoes out of Mexico. So we're going to have a massive tomato shortage in America. Well, for a lot of people, just crack out your seeds, your tomato seeds, and start growing your own tomatoes. Some things could be as simple as that. It's just growing our own food. And that's why having seed vaults are really, really important. But if it was to happen on a large scale, like it's happened in Ireland, the potato crop, it failed. There was other food in Ireland at the time, but the British wouldn't let us eat it. So the British wouldn't let us eat the food that was being grown and raised. We had so many sheep at the time. Ireland is a country that has a lot of sheep and a lot of pigs. But the Irish people couldn't eat. They couldn't eat the mutton, the lamb, or the pork. The Brits wouldn't allow us to eat it. They were sending it overseas. So therefore, you had one crop failure, like the potato, and it had massive consequences to the Irish population. You know, I don't think something like that exactly could happen in America. But if we had a massive wheat failure in America, like, we're really going to feel the repercussions of that. Wheat is a massive crop, and it's in so many different food items that we eat. So just to lose that one wheat harvest over a season, it's going to have massive consequences to how we live and eat. So my thinking is that if we're storing for a year, then we allow ourselves to be able to recover without panicking, without going to the streets, without being um, in such a fear that we're just willing to do anything. Because I do believe that that's exactly what's going to happen. Even decent people, even people that you would point to this guy and say he's a good guy, even that guy is going to freak out if his kids are going hungry and he's worried about them dying. He will probably resort to doing anything to feed his family. So, like I said, this video is probably a bit longer than I intended. Um, I want to be able to survive at least 1 year to overcome whatever issues we might have in that year, and it's a stopgap, right? It's the food that we put away is a stopgap for whatever might happen in that year to help get us back on our feet again. I'm not one of those guys who is into storing food for your family for 50 years. I believe that we have to have community, so we just need enough food to figure out the problem and get back on our feet. Leave a comment, subscribe if you like what I've got to say, and I'm excited. I'm excited to get into this and responding to people's comments.